Alright, what's up, boys? It's Joe, and we are here doing a probably more complex tutorial style of video. Unfortunately, we're going to cover a lot in this one. To start off with, we're going to be going over artisanships and how do I promote those, kind of leading into, well, what do I do with those artisanships? Like, what's the point in promoting them and focusing in on something, and then building off of that artisanship and crafting. How do rarities affect things? Like, what's the point? Do I actually care if something's legendary? Like, do I care if something's common, uncommon, etc.? And just kind of tying that all in together, hopefully seamlessly, but we'll see. There's a lot of information here. I will say some prefaces, like always. This is not a how to get journeyman or grandmaster artisanships in 24 hours. Not the point of this. Point of this video is to just kind of watch and kind of learn, okay, this is where I can go to promote my fishing and my carpentry and my cooking, whatever you're trying to do in artisanship. This is where I go to promote it. This is what I do with it. This is how rarity is going to impact it. This is the point of caring about rarity and hopefully adding a little bit of a resource. I will say, amazing resource. Ash's Codex is a very resourceful website that I would highly recommend checking out and just kind of almost crutching on, because it's going to allow you to quick search things as if it's like an integrated wiki, because they're pretty on top of updating things as soon as it gets released. And I honestly find it's the most accurate source of information when it comes to crafting out there so far. So with all that said, we're going to head over to the beginning crafting stations and get to work. So to start off with, a big thing I see is people are confused about, how do I actually level up my crafting? How do I promote? Because you only have 5 things that you can tier up past the beginner novice level into artisanship. Into apprentice artisanships. And then from there, it's only 4 to journeyman, 3 to the next tiers, and so on, until you can only have 1 actual grandmaster trait, right? So, to start off with, if you spawn in the Riverlands, you're going to spawn down here in the Aelan Divine Gate, this Ember Spring right here. And then you'll either go to Lionhold or you go to Samia's down here. And you're going to have these little white dots. They're points of interest. I mean, there should be a lot of other points of interest, but these little white ones that don't have the blue inside, they're going to be called the wood shop and the laboratory and the cooking station, or something like the cookhouse, mining or stoneworks, and so forth. Smithy, textile mill, hideworks, agricultural supply. So I'm just going to go up to each one and kind of show you what you can promote at each one. Because a big core fundamental part of this game is tiering up your gatherables and your crafting and your processing and to the next tier of advancement or the next promotion level, such as apprentice, journeyman, and so forth. And in order to do that, you have to go to one of these little stations. A big one that I want to start off with here is the stoneworks, because a lot of people intuitively think, oh, well, if you're going to do smithing, you need ores, which means you need to mine, which means you level up mining at smithy. Not necessarily how it works. So we're going to start off with stonemasonry, because this is, I think, one of the more convoluted and confusing ones. But once you kind of understand, it's super simple. So when you get to level 10 in an artisanship, you can promote it to the next tier. And then, in this case, if you're doing stone masonry or mining, you'll come to the stoneworks, which is basically just due north of Samia's Hope, east of the Riverlands. Each spawn, like the anvils, is a little goofy right now, so that's why I'm not doing that, but it should be similar for each spawn over time. So these little stations where you can do this at, neutral stations. I have the novice level crafting stations. So when you do that, you're just going to walk up to him, and he's going to ask you what you want to talk about, and there's only one option. So you say, can I talk about promoting certifications? And then he allows you to promote. So I can't do it on this character because he's only level 1. I don't really farm on this character. I've only done PvE combat on this one at the church so far. But if I were to have level 10 mining, I could promote my certification, and instead of novice, it would put him at apprentice. So the stonemasonry, or the stoneworks is what this one is called, the stoneworks. You got a jeweler station, a stonemasonry station. You can promote mining, which you cannot do with the smithy. So do not go to the smithy if you're trying to level up mining or promote it. You can do stonemasonry and then jewelry. And then in order to craft some of the novice stuff, because settlements will not start off with stations, you can come in here with your stone at the stonemasonry table, and you can just start turning it into whatever you need. So you'll see these different recipes. If you're in the Riverlands, obviously you're probably going to use a lot of basalt and granite. It should have a recipe that you can use for whatever stone that you are intending to use. And then same thing with like rubies. If you're trying to do jewelry, you'll use rubies at the stonemasonry table, and so forth. And then some of these other more complex things we're not going to go super in depth to. Just try it out, figure it out if you like it or not. See what artisanship you're interested in. Similarly, you can go up to the jeweler station and in the beginning of the game, and instead of having to worry about, well, what settlements leveled up and gotten a jeweler, like whatever, you don't need none of that. When you're brand new to the game, starting out your artisanships for the first time, you're like, I want to try out jewelry. Just go to the stoneworks, check out the jewelry here, which isn't going to be a lot unless you found some random recipes that you learned, and just see what you can craft, see what it requires, and see, okay, I need some zinc fragments and rubies. Well, I know that requires this stove over here, which means I can come in here and I can cut gems. I can make some stone fragments, and boom, I can make my jewelry, and then I can start selling it or using it. We're not going to go too much into like, oh, it costs 3 rubies to make this earring. These recipes are going to change over time. They've already changed several times. There's been different iterations of different. Maybe the beginner ones are going to be similar, right? Because they're basic ingredients that you use. But over time, they might change. So don't focus on what each ingredient costs right now. Just focus on, this is what I need, and this is how I actually utilize this function of the game. Alright, so that being said, we're going to move on to the next few stations over here, and then we'll take a look at what you can level up at each station, basically, just so it's a little more clear, because in the instance of fishing, there's not really a fishing station, so it's not super intuitive if you've not played the game before as to what you would need to level up fishing. So we're going to go on to the next station. We'll be right back. This is the wood shop foreman. When you come up and talk to him, he's going to do the similar thing to the stonemasonry one. He's going to just ask you to what you want to promote, and he'll do lumberjacking, milling, and carpentry. And then so when you get each of those to level 10, it'll allow you to do that. So then you've got lumber milling station. This is a crate packing station that we're not going to go into in this specific video, but maybe in the future. And then you have your carpentry station. So important to note is, and we'll get into that a little bit in depth, is talked about promoting things, is you're going to unlock newer tiers of craftables by doing that. So that is the point of that. But this is a lumber station. It's just to the northeast of Samia's, right next to the stoneworks, kind of in between the cookhouse and this ember spring that's on top of the laboratory right here. So we're going to head over to the cookhouse next, and then we'll kind of see what you can promote there. Alright, now at the cookhouse, we have just arrived. It's right next to the wood shop. It takes about 5 seconds to run to each of these locations from the other one, so pretty handy, pretty simple, pretty close to the spawn, nice and tightly compacted. But when you want to do the cookhouse, you hopefully don't fall off the fishing dock. A lot of people will sit here and AFK fish, because this is coincidentally where you do fishing. You'll see there's a cooking station and all that good stuff, but then you'll have the executive chef. And he does a similar thing. He says, welcome to the cookhouse, and you just say, I want to promote things, and it'll allow you to promote cooking and hunting and fishing. And you'll notice two of these are gatherables, and that's intentional. There's only one crafting or milling, so you're only going to have one station here, and it's going to be the cooking station, which cooking is pretty useful, pretty fun. And then you'll get your hunting and cooking promotions here as well from the novice tier. And then you'll go on from there to proceed to be able to gather higher tier fish, higher tier huntables, etc. Those are some pretty, I want to specifically talk about hunting. It is a pretty unique trait right now. I don't want to get into the specifics of you find these random mobs and you hunt them. That's going to change over time. They've already said that this is a placeholder of sorts. Maybe it's gonna look similar, but it's not gonna be the same in the future. So I'm not gonna go into the specifics of how it works. But hunting is always going to be somewhat useful, or whatever ends up replacing hunting, that system is going to be useful because it's pretty key for a lot of armors and bags and different useful items in the game that are almost like mandatorily required to keep progressing. So, but just keep in mind, this is a prime example, hunting specifically, of how that system is going to change over time. So we're not going to go into the specifics of how that works and how it functions, but just know this is where you come to promote it, and then you can go on to the next tier and start gathering some higher tier resources. So we'll move on to the next station. So now we're at the laboratory, which again, it's like right next to the wood shop and the cookhouse and the stoneworks. Still in that similar northeast area of Samia's. And the laboratory is a little bit of a more unique place because this is where you're going to get scribing and arcane engineering and alchemy. You're gonna have your alchemy stations up here. So what you'll do, similarly, you're always gonna have your vendor, and then you'll talk to the laboratory manager. He says welcome, talk to your promotions, and he's gonna give you the opportunity to promote arcane engineering, alchemy, and scribing. These three are like, you're gonna notice most of the time, most of these little areas are going to have a gatherable, and then some kind of processing or some kind of crafting, and maybe one or two of each. You're going to notice that this is arcane engineering, scribing, and I believe alchemy is a processing. Yep, and then alchemy. These are all pretty complex high tier craftables. These are some higher tier things. And some of them are pretty difficult to craft, especially the higher tier you go. So I want to preface these three specifically by saying, if you're doing these solo, do a little bit of homework. Or Ash's Codex is a pretty solid source to be able to go and look for, okay, I want to get an alchemy. What does this recipe take, Like, how difficult is this going to be? So I'd highly recommend utilizing ashescodex.com if you're going to get into one of these three traits, because these can be some of the most intensive, exhaustive ones that require just tons and tons of just raw materials the more you get into it. And it's not super easy to show that, but hopefully when we get to the apprentice stations inside of one of the actual towns, you'll be able to kind of see like these three are really intensive. But this is where you promote them. You can begin your level 1 crafting here and craft those up to level 10, and then you'll just talk to a laboratory manager and you'll skill one of those up. And then for the next half of the artisanships, we have to go to the west side over by Lion's Hold, and we'll head to the hide works, the textile mill, the smithy, and then the agricultural supply station, and look at what you can skill up there. Alright, so here we are at the smithy, which here's the spawn, here's Lion's Hold. You'll just go right over to the west here and you'll find the smithy. This is the next one we're going to talk about. If you're doing armor smithing, weapon smithing, that kind of deal. So here's your weapon smithing station, armor smithing station, your metalworking station. You'll just come up to the smithy foreman. He's going to do a similar thing. He's going to ask you if you want to promote or demote. You can demote them. Weapon smithing, armor smithing, metalworking, and you can promote those. From there, we're just going to move on to the textile mill, which is right over here, pretty close by, and we're just going to kind of run through quickly and see what each one has, what you can level up at each one, and so forth. So not the vendor, the specialist. He's going to let you do weaving and tailoring, and that's going to be it at this station. A little more unique in that aspect. He's a little more consolidated, but here's your tailoring station, and then your weaving station's in here. So you can do all your weaving and tailoring at these stations, promote them, and unlock some new crafts. And then the final one here before we need to go across the river is just up here, the tanning area, which I believe is called the Hideworks. Yeah, it's called the Hideworks. And you just run up here, talk to the lead hide worker. He's going to allow you to do your leatherworking and your tanning. And then you can utilize these stations for your tier 1 leatherworking. And there should be a tanning station right around the corner over here. Yep. So you can utilize these in order to begin your artisanships with these respective careers as well. and then we're going to go across the river right up on the hill in this area-ish to get that final one, and then we'll head into town and kind of talk about how kind of crafting works and the dynamics of it a little bit, just basic mechanics of it, so that you will have everything you need to know in order to actually begin your artisanship playing experience. As you get up into the agricultural supply station, which is right across the river from the smithy to the west of Lionhold still, you'll see that there's a Lord of the Seven and herbalism vendor. This guy can give you some tasks and whatnot. You can talk to him if you want to get into that, but I'm not here to talk about him. You can ignore these two for the time being. You just go up to this dude and you go, hey, I want to promote my herbalism, my farming, and my animal husbandry. Herbalism is the gatherable in this case, and then you'll have your farming station and your animal husbandry station right here to train horses, which actually I could train a horse, but I'm not going to. So you can level up those and begin crafting here, and this is a pretty resourceful place to know. So kind of while we're here, when you're first starting out in crafting, we're going to use probably herbalism and farming as an example here. But when you first get into crafting, you're going to notice that you have to go up into these stations, and you're going to look at, say, we'll just go with mulch. Say mulch because it's pretty simplistic recipe. I want to craft this to level up my farming. I'm not saying that you should or shouldn't. Figure that out on your own pace. This isn't a min-max guide for you. But if you're going to use this one, and you look and you say, any gathered plants, okay, well, I can gather daffodils and snowdrops and whatever else. And then wood chips, which you need now this lumber milling to get, which is just to shortcut that, you go to the wood shop and you craft any timber, basically. It gives you some wood chips. And then you can use those wood chips with whatever this rot root pulp is. It's a basic ingredient, not a quality ingredient. Quality ingredients will affect the tier of the things that you produce based off of the tier that you input, as opposed to basic ingredients, which only have one tier. They're common. You're going to be like, okay, well, I'm going to run up here, and what do you have? And then you can look, and you see that he has a bunch of different materials. I can't remember, what was it? It was root rot pulp or sleep rot extract, whichever one it was. You can just basically reference, oh, it needs root rot pulp. So go up to the vendor and you just say, go to materials, and you just search root rot pulp, and you can buy a root rot pulp, and then you can craft whatever it is that you're trying to craft. Different ones are gonna have different ingredients. Like this one needs water, and this one needs water, and flax needs water, you know. So they're gonna need different things. Like this one needs seeds and so forth. Like each one is gonna have a different purpose or a different necessary ingredient. So kind of read through that and double check. Some of these might be a little different going forward, so don't hang up on, oh, I need these specific ingredients from the vendor. That might change over time. It has in the past. It's going to continue to change over time because, you know, it's an alpha. But just keep that in mind that some things you have to buy from the vendor. And then we're going to head to Jova, and I'll kind of talk about rarity a little bit more, how you can get higher tier stuff, what rarity does, and just what to do with those apprentice level craftables or crafting certifications, and what that means for you as an artisan. Alright, so as you get into Jova, you can just walk into the center market. It's going to be similar for any town. There's going to be a main market system, and you're going to have your equipment vendor over here. I want to point this out specifically because each one of these little stations will have their own equipment vendor that you can only buy those materials at. This one has everything you need. So if you're needing flux or beeswax or looking for tools to make whatever, it's going to have everything you need right here. And you can just buy from this one simple guy. He is the only vendor. Well, he's not the only vendor, but he's going to be the primary vendor that you can use. So then when it comes to utilizing these stations, when a town starts to level up and gets to that tier 3 state like Jova, you're going to have these little stations that pop up, and these are all going to be carpentry apprentice, lumber milling apprentice. Every station is going to be apprentice. And then from there, they can start to level up into journeyman, etc. depending on what buildings they want to build, which is going to be elected by the mayor. So, keep in mind who you want to be the mayor, because they're going to dictate what journeyman tools you can get, or journeyman stations you get access to. So, just going to quickly show, Jova has the journeyman stuff for like lumber milling and carpentry and all that. So it's very similar setup to the one over in the spawn to the north of Simiez, but it's just got journeyman stuff instead of simplistic apprentice stuff. So we're going to use, specifically in this example, the carpentry and lumber milling is the primary example that we're going to look at for what do you do in the next tiers. But it's going to be the same with any other station if the mayor decides to build like a stone masonry area or the mining area or the smithy area. It's all going to be a similar thing as far as you go to the apprentice area, you go to the journeyman. It's just going to unlock progressively better tiers. So for instance, if you remember here in the starter one, really only had access to like oak and western larch and ash and eastern hemlock. And then in this one, you start to get weeping willow unlocked and dragon tree and wood chips, but more primarily you get dragon tree and weeping willow. Weeping willow is going to be the big one for now. As more areas get added, there's going to be this insert second tier here, and you notice it's requiring the apprentice crafting certification. In this case, it's just lumber milling as certification. And it'll tell you here as well, certification apprentice. So you need to have apprentice lumber milling, which is a processing, in order to actually craft a weeping willow timber. Similar to that with boards, you also need apprentice to craft any board. So that's kind of where you start to unlock things, because the more boards are going to be used in a lot of higher tier apprentice and journeyman type crafts. So again, there's gonna be more trees, more different types of trees added, but it's gonna be a similar process. If you need to craft something, you'll just go to that station and you'll see, I need to make some weeping willow timbers so that I can make my weeping willow board. Okay, well, I need whatever basic ingredient, and it'll output it, and then you gotta remember your fuel. And then similarly, say we're going to keep using the weeping willow board in this example. I want to make a weeping willow board. Okay, well, I need these two basic ingredients combined with 2 raw wood and a timber. And I need to have an apprentice lumber milling, so I can do this all here. I'll show you everything there. And then if you want to take your boards or whatever else, and you want to timbers in this example, and you want to craft some stuff, you can go to the carpenter station. And so this is all certification novice. But then you get into the higher tier ones that are apprentice. You need to have apprentice carpentry to level those up. And this becomes a big thing because at the current moment, you can only make apprentice level fishing poles and hunting bows at the carpentry station, which means you need apprentice carpentry in order to make a apprentice fishing pole and hunting bow. Similarly, for the pickaxe, the sickle, and the lumberjacking axe, you need apprentice weaponsmithing. So it kind of all ties in together that you really want to kind of like, what do I need to do to get this? You got to work with people, maybe barter with people in order to get some of these things, because you have to focus on 5 different artisanships. So, but you can kind of see in here, it just unlocks more complex crafts. Like you can get better bows here when you get to the apprentice tier. And then it'll have a similar effect when you get to the next promotion, which is journeyman and master, grandmaster, etc. So all of these different tiers will have buildings that need to be constructed in these settlements, and then you can just go up to the carpentry journeyman station, and it's gonna have. Okay, well, I don't care about caravan components right now. Sorry, brother. But you can go up to the short bow area, and you're like, okay, I remember this from the apprentice station, and now it's got a journeyman station, which does even more damage, and it kind of like has a huge jump, and then it like doubles again, like it's another huge jump. Like you're getting like basically 1,000 extra damage, and this is just the basic tier. So this is what we're gonna go into. How like what do the rarities do here? Like how does a rarity affect my craft? Is it gonna affect it with like basic ingredients, etc.? No. So first of all, basic ingredients at the current moment are only common. They don't affect your rarity, or at least they shouldn't. There's been bugs here and there where they do, but they shouldn't. So in the example of your apprentice short bow that you want to make your fizz power. You're playing fighter or something. You want to make your fizz power short bow. You need a bunch of ash boards and a bunch of daffodil bolts. Okay. we'll say we're gonna use just ash boards as the primary example, because it's gonna apply like to anything. So say you're trying to make your ash boards, you go over to your lumber milling station and you say, okay, I need some ash wood and ash timber to craft this. Okay, well, I need to make some ash timber then. So this only has one ingredient basically that's going to affect the rarity. If you put in a uncommon or green ash wood, it's going to give you an ash timber. It's just a 1-to-1 ratio. There's no like figuring out and calculating what the rarity is going to be. So then if you go into the ash board and you create some ash boards, and say you have you only had 2 green ash woods or uncommon, so you had to make your ash timber out of common. So when you put in 2 green ash wood and this final one is the common being white, just a white timber, it's going to come out as a white board. So it's a little weird in the aspect that it does kind of equate out in some instances, but when you have these low cost recipes that don't have a lot of craftables, such as specifically the board here that only has 3 ingredients that you can put in, it's pretty much just going to be the lowest tier that you have there. It's going to kind of equal out to that. So when you craft these, try and keep that in mind. You want similar rarities. You don't need to be putting in your legendary ash wood with like a common ash timber, because it's going to severely reduce the quality. Which you're like, okay, well, you're still not really explaining what does it make a difference, what the point of the rarity is. So let's kind of follow that similar line of thought. Let's say you get a couple green ash boards out. You get your green daffodil bolts after you do all your weaving and whatnot. And then you come in here and you're like, okay, I'm ready to make my short bow. I've got all my ingredients. Sorry, my 25 green ash boards. I've got my 10 green daffodil bolts. I'm going to craft it. So this right here will show you the base statistics of the weapon that you're crafting. Now, each time you increase the rarity, or for every tick of rarity, it's going to slightly increase these statistics. Now, maybe a common tier to an uncommon tier, you're only going to get like a couple percent increase. Like maybe you get like 970. I can't remember off the top of my head for this, but maybe you get like 970 damage instead of 945 fizz damage. You get a couple extra strength, a little bit more speed, mana, etc. It's only going to increase slightly, but then you're multiplying that for each tier as you go from common to uncommon, uncommon to rare, rare to heroic, heroic to epic, epic to legendary, right? Like there's several tiers in that, so you want to kind of keep in mind when you're crafting, how can I, if you're going to craft gear like this, how can I combine my ingredients to make sure that I'm getting as high a tier quality as I can for the gear that I'm going to use. If you're just using it to sell in the market, just keep that in mind as well, because even if you're not going to use it, people are going to seek the higher stuff. Even if it's just a slight advantage, it's going to give that slight like 1 to 2% damage increases. And that's going to be the difference between like a successful fight in PvP and a failed one, or in PvE it's going to be the difference between you stealing a mob because you out DPS the other group or not out DPSing them, right? So it's going to have long-term effects. So that's why people are going to seek those higher numbers, even if it's only like a couple percent increase in damage or whatever statistics are on it. So just keep that in mind. They're gonna pay more for that. But all in all, you can apply that same thought though to any other craftable, whether it's armor or weapon or tools. Tools will have higher different rarities when you're making apprentice and journeyman tools. It'll allow you to get more resources or higher quality resources or more XP in that given resource. Like apprentice fishing rod gives experience. So if you get a legendary apprentice fishing rod, if you've got a lot of flax laying around that you just want to burn on it, I think it's flax anyways, then you can take that, make a legendary fishing rod, or actually I think it's daffodils, but whatever the resource is, you can go and you can make a legendary fishing rod. It'll give you a lot more fishing XP if you really want to level up fishing really quick. Those are the things to keep in mind. So rarity matters and crafting matters. I am going to kind of conclude that thought though, because that's a lot of information to just kind of meander over a little bit. Look up ashes in codex.com, and I'll try and send the link to Jake so he puts it up on the screen. But ashescodex.com, it's gonna it's got a pretty handy resource to be able to look up recipes for one, but also say you want to go into up here and you're doing weaponsmithing. This is the mining area right here. It's got a bunch of buildings of like your armor smithing and weaponsmithing. But say you want to go in here and you want to make a pickaxe, you can look up the apprentice mining pickaxe on Ash's Codex, and you can kind of plug and play. Well, what if I use 10 epic Western Larch with like 10 heroic copper fragments and 1 legendary basalt weapon mold? It'll kind of tell you how close you are to being to the next tier, up or down, and kind of what the stats will be ahead of time. And then, as always, if you're using some of those higher tier resources, like say you're making a basalt armor mold and you have your basalt and your oak timber, put them in there, and before you click craft, just double check. It'll show you the rarity of what's going to be outputted here. Right now, I don't have anything in there, so it's just going to show common because the default ingredients are common. But if you put in like a heroic basalt and an epic oak timber, it'll show you what the outputted resource will be, so that you know exactly what you're getting and you're not just kind of guesstimating. But Ash's Codex will kind of help you plan ahead of time to see, okay, if I'm doing all of this with ash boards and I'm doing all of this with daffodil bolts or whatever bolts to make this bow, what exactly do I need to produce this? And you can kind of be like, okay, well, according to this, if I use epic ash boards and heroic bolts, I'm going to get this tier bow, which would probably be a heroic in that instance, but I'm going to get a heroic bow, which that's totally what I want. So then you know, okay, I want to hold on to my epic ash, because I'm going to need a lot of epic ash, around 75, I think, if I remember correctly. And then I'm going to need to hold on to heroic of whatever, I think it is daffodils for the bow, heroic daffodils. And then you know exactly kind of what to be looking for, what to be farming, and what to be, maybe if you see someone selling it in global or the trade chat, you know, okay, this guy's selling it for a good price. I really need that to craft my next tool or my next weapon, my next piece of gear. So it's kind of an intro level, kind of basic. This is how artisanships work. Again, I'm going to remind you, don't get hung up on, okay, well, this carriage costs 10 oak timbers. It's always going to cost 10 oak timbers. That maybe that's the case. Most likely, these recipes are going to change. They're going to evolve. They are evolving. They are changing. So, kind of concluding remarks here is you have your 5 artisanships. You need to kind of decide, I want to use these 5 artisanships, and I want them to I want to make sure they interact with each other well, and I want to test these out. So how do I level them? How do I promote them? How do I progress with them? And you got to find the foreman, which this settlement has one because it's a journeyman workshop. But to start off with, you're going to have to find those inside the designated areas in the spawn. You're going to have to go up to those vendors and kind of talk to them and promote those that way in order to continue to progress those. And then you'll be able to craft newer and better tools and keep leveling those up efficiently to continue to progress. Also keep in mind, recipes, again, I cannot stress enough, these are going to change over time. So don't get stressed out if you're like, I gotta get my Excel sheet going right now that says in order to make a timber I need a singular oak log. I mean, well, that one's probably going to be the same, but maybe it gets changed a little bit. Maybe the basic ingredients get changed out for things. So don't worry about memorizing what is everything craftable and how do I make everything. Like I have to know everything at all times. Like, that's not important. The important part is just kind of trying things out, seeing what artisanships you want to really get involved in and kind of dedicate time to level up, because you do have to dedicate time to only 5 of them. You can level up as many as you want to 10, but you can only promote 5 of them. So you got to kind of narrow in, like, which ones do I enjoy, which ones do I want to play with, which ones do I want to try out, and just kind of go from there. So just a concluding thing too, if you guys have any questions, because there's a lot of information in this one, we'll try and keep them a little more simple like the previous ones. But artisanship is massive and it's important. So if you have any questions, put down in the comment section. I'll answer them as quickly as possible and get you some good, accurate information, and kind of crutch on. There's a bunch of resources out there like ashescodex.com and and other, the wiki, Ashes Creation wiki is not too bad either. But Ashes Codex is a great resource that I would highly recommend checking out, because it'll help you figure out, what do I need to craft certain things, because Artisanships huge in this game. So, but yeah, if you got any questions, just leave a comment down below. Thanks, bros.